I was sitting at my desk this morning contemplating a thought. Would our two U.S. senators, Jim Risch and Mike Crapo, would they be willing to vote for a new majority leader in the U.S. Senate in order to remove this scoundrel Mitch McConnell from the picture? McConnell is a so-called Republican from Kentucky. He has been in this role for quite some time now, but a lot of people question his bona fides when it comes to his actual conservatism. And he has been called directly a liar on the Senate floor by some of his colleagues. And he doesn't dispute that. Apparently, he says things behind closed doors and then doesn't carry them through. And today, the big issue happens to be the death of the Republican health care bill, which likely was a bad bill in the first place. On the other hand, Donald Trump made a good point to some visiting senators during dinner at the White House last night. He said, "You're going to make all of us Republicans look like dopes if you don't pass something." In other words, get something done now and you can always worry about correcting it later. There are people who criticize the president, saying he could have had greater leadership, but from what I'm reading across a host of Republican and conservative sites this morning, this all comes back to Mitch McConnell. This is from Philip Klein, a writer at the Washington Examiner. The Examiner is a call it a subsidiary of National Review. Many of the same writers work for both outfits. Very conservative publication, and they're not what you would call big fans of Donald Trump, but the headline today is "Don't Blame Trump for Republican Healthcare Woes." The writer says, given the problems, it would be easy to point the finger at the president, who after all is the chief executive. He stormed into Washington on a promise to fix the healthcare mess and deliver a beautiful piece of legislation as only an expert deal maker could. But the truth is that Republican problems on health care are much deeper than the president. It's true that a more engaged and informed president, he writes, may have helped along the process more than Trump has, but it's also true at the end of the day, Trump is going to sign anything that Republicans can get through Congress, and he will boast that it is a major win and the greatest piece of legislation in galactic history. The chaos, the writer says, we're seeing thus goes way beyond Trump, and then he spends several pages breaking it all down. And it gets worse for McConnell's side of the issue, or for his story. Eric Erickson, who has some excellent sources on Capitol Hill, writing at his website today, The Resurgent, and he writes, "Mr. President, why are you letting Mitch McConnell scuttle your agenda?" And the writer says, behind the scenes, McConnell has been working over liberal senators to assure them his plan will not actually scrap the Medicaid expansion and that he will undermine Senator Ted Cruz's amendment to provide individual freedom and health care choices. McConnell again and again, the writer says, stacks the deck against conservatives, setting them up to be the fall guy for his own failures. The president's various nominees, according to Erickson, are on the slow walk through McConnell's Senate, where the filibuster no longer applies. Obamacare repeal is just about dead, even though it cannot be filibustered either. Tax reform is dead on arrival. The entirety of the GOP agenda is stuck with Mitch McConnell, who seems intent to let it all die on the vine while blaming conservatives. 10 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story today on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington will be joining us in a few minutes. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Also, Grant Lobes is, I believe, on the way, coming up after news at 9 o'clock, our Twin Falls County prosecutor. A lot to talk about there as well. But health care at the moment remains the top story. And I think people are feeling, if you're a conservative and you're a Republican and you voted for various candidates because they made this promise, once again, you've been hoodwinked. And again, the folks in Washington seem to think that they can continually get away with it, that they'll just come back every 2, 4, 6 years and hoodwink you all over again. Yesterday, Randy Staples made a comment when I pointed out what's going to happen when we can't pay for Medicaid any longer. Oh, well, what'll happen if we don't take some... Look, folks, the money isn't going to be there. Nobody in Washington wants to face up to it. The liberals in the media give them a pass on this count. The country is circling the drain when it comes to its finances. A story over the weekend, and I referenced it yesterday, it was on Yahoo, a very liberal website, said that in another dozen to 15 years, Social Security is going to be broke. Not a zilch. So when you go to get your check out of the mail every month, you're just going to get a statement that says, hey, sorry. And that'll be along those lines. Healthcare going the same direction. Tucker Carlson brought this up last night, speaking to Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, the man who's trying to make sure that this thing, well, from a administrative standpoint, doesn't all come crashing down. And during the course of the conversation, Carlson brought up a subject that people have been dancing around for a long time, and it's called socialized medicine, which means a very low level of medical care for everyone, with only the wealthy being able to actually pay for greater care. A low level of care, long waiting lines, and you'll see things happening as you see them happen now or happening now in places like England, where a little baby, they're just waiting for it to die so they can save some money so they don't have to stress the system. Because if they take care of every child, obviously they can't afford it. Tucker Carlson and Tom Price on Fox News Channel last night.
Choices make it so that the market of health coverage, if you will, responds to patients, not to insurance companies and not to government. That's the key.
How far are we from single payer nationally for catastrophic coverage? I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm even hearing conservatives
for catastrophic
always
coverage
been against.
Only?
Yeah. Single payer for catastrophic coverage.
Yeah, I think that the consequences of that actually reduce the ability for you to get the kind of coverage that you want for the services that you.
Well, that may be absolutely right, but this is partly a political question.
Two, I think the answer to that question has to wait until the outcome of this debate. If the Congress and the president are able if Congress is able to pass a bill and put it on the president's desk, then I think that you will be a long way away from a single payer
For
system.
sure, but if you don't, we're closer to it. And would you be for it or no?
The devil's in the details. I'm not for something where the government decides what individuals, what's covered for individuals.
All right, can we get back to this notion of, well, we need it because it's the right thing to do and it's the humane thing to do. The country is officially, that is the federal government, make it more pointed, more focused. The federal government is officially $20 trillion in debt. But I remember reading nobody really has a handle on what that amount could be. Could be much larger than that. That is officially $20 trillion in debt. Across the country, state governments and some local governments which made promises they can't keep. Think states like Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut. We talked about this last week on the air. They're going to go belly up. California likely will go belly up at some point, and that's going to be one mightily big fish. And it's going to have a lot of ripple effects when that happens. So you may have, and George Will did an estimate about 10 years ago on this and suggested the actual debt across all of these platforms, your federal government, your state governments, your local governments, was in excess of $130 trillion. And I can't stress it enough because you can say a number and people can't get their arms around it. But $1 billion is when you actually stack up 1,000 million. So if you have $1,000 million and you stack it up, you have $1 billion. If you stack up $1 billion, you have to stack up $1,000 billion to get to $1 trillion. Think about that for a moment. $131 trillion in actual debt across the country. Plus, Western Europe is heavily in debt. Many other countries around the world are heavily in debt. At some point, you realize something has to give here, and to sit here and say, well, we can have Medicaid, and we can give away some more stuff, and then we'll have socialized medicine too. Then I shared with you on the air a few months ago, some of you may remember this, I think I've shared it a few times, about the dentist in New York City who was caught a dozen years ago, and she had been fleecing the taxpayers for years, claiming that she was seeing poor patients up to, if she had actually been seeing these people, she was filing the paperwork she would have been seeing nearly 1,000 patients a day. So now you treble that, you multiply that. It grows exponentially because you'll have a lot of people out there who think, well, I need to pay off a big medical school debt. Maybe this is the way to do it. And, if there's 1,000 of us doing it, maybe we'll get caught. But if there's 10,000 of us doing it, then good luck in catching us. You understand how this ends up, where the end game is with all of this. And yet you've got people in Washington who they can't bring themselves to telling you the truth. Winston Churchill was shunned when he was a young politician in England. Most people don't know this, but by the time he was prime minister twice. By the time he was prime minister the first time, he was already 65 years old. because the other people in government, they didn't want him anywhere around. They said, well, he's a grandstander. He tries to center attention on himself. No, what he did, what annoyed them, was he told people the truth, the unvarnished truth. He didn't sugarcoat anything. And his colleagues thought, well, we want to get reelected, so we'll just push him off to the side and try our best to silence him. So they would tell people, no, 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 don't worry, there's not going to be any Great Depression. No, 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 don't worry, there's not going to be a world war. And they would do these things and just keep telling people, everything's going to be fine, fine, vote for me. And I'll give you some more free stuff. And he kept saying, no, the people can handle it. They can handle it if you tell them the truth. What really annoys them is when you lie to them for generations, for decade upon decade upon decade. You lie to them, and then when everything goes to pieces, then you come around and say, well, gee, I tell you what, if you reelect me, we'll go down there and we'll learn them, and we'll learn them good, and we'll repeal Obamacare. And when I'm done learning them, they'll know they're learned. It can't keep going on, folks. It can't keep happening this way. I'm telling you, at some point, I brought it up with Randy yesterday, at some point, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, but when the gravy train stops pulling into your town and you've suddenly got to make some stark choices in your own life, and these guys come around at election time and say, hey, pleasure to see you. Vote for me. I'll go down there and I'll learn them good. Just like I told you 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago, like I told your papa, like I told your grandpa. Things are going to get mightily ugly. It's 8:18. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I'll squeeze in a caller only about a minute before the break, but caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Well, I know I've said this before, but Iceland and Greece were in the same boat. I'm not mistaken, on Iceland. And Iceland said, we're going to straighten our lives up and do what reality says we should do. And they are right now, if you check out their economy and their stable economy because of what they've done, it's changed everything. And then, of course, you've got Greece, who's still kicking the can down the road, just like America. And you see, when I see a Democrat stand there and say whatever it is they say, and you say insincerity, the logical insincerity of it is such BS. And you say, who the hell believes any of this stuff? Well, I guess the people that want it to continue to flow are the ones, the environmentalists, whoever. I'll hang up. But
hey,
the thing of it is this: it never ends. But one day, how does America go broke? I'll hang up.
Thank you. And people out there wonder why. They know people who've gone up into the Panhandle and moved back into the woods and taken all of their survival gear with them. I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? 20 minutes now after 8 o'clock. We're at 65. I need to adjust my trifocals here. 65. We've got more coming up. Also today, Steve Millington will be joining us, and I believe we'll be seeing Grant Lobes a little bit later in the program, too. More on this healthcare issue on the way in just a few minutes. Can I tell you, you can't expect anybody in media to, because they're all on board as fellow travelers, they think that you can still keep printing money and spending it willy-nilly and that there won't be any consequences. And none of them obviously have a background unless you're an economic reporter. But if you're writing about economics like a Larry Kudlow, then you're a conservative. You're not a liberal because you understand how things work. It looks as if we're in a cooler stretch of weather for the next couple of weeks. It's not going to rain a lot. It's still not going to be, I say cooler, relatively cooler. Highs in the low 90s the next few days. That means a lot of people will still be firing up the old air conditioning unit. And let me just share this with you. If you've got some troubles, because it has been working overtime, obviously, call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric today. The team at Ramsey's will come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy summers are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue. I've got that in there somewhere. Overland Avenue in Burley. Call them at 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Speaking of media and how it works in all of these things, yesterday on NBC's Today Show, Willie Geist, his father is the humorist on the CBS Sunday morning program, So because his dad was in the business, he got a job and he didn't have to pay his dues at all. Here's Willie Geist with his guest Al Gore, tossing Mr. Gore some really, really tough questions. So, Al, how's the family? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I didn't know about the divorce. All right. Well, how's the kids, Al? How's the big old 20,000 square foot house, Al? Gee, Al, you should have been president. I thought so, too. Take a listen to their conversation.
I couldn't help but notice as I was reading through your comments over the last several months that you were open-minded the day after Donald Trump was elected president. In fact, you went to Trump Tower and met with him in December to talk about climate change. You had hope that maybe he could be helpful on that issue. This week marks 6 months since the Trump administration was sworn into office. How's he doing?
Well, our country's going through a challenging time for sure. We've never had a president who's deliberately made decisions, the effect of which is to tear down America's standing in the world, starting with his withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. The climate crisis is by far the most serious challenge we face. But he's also undermined our alliances, such as NATO, and hurt our standing in the world in many ways. So it's going to be, the months ahead will be a test for the American people. We've got to get through this.
I was the rightful president, and if I had been president, as I should have been, then NATO would be in good shape. And I'm telling you, nobody else likes us, and Willie here from NBC won't be asking me for any evidence, because he's on board with me, and he knows I was the rightful president. 826, we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com.
Good morning, Bill. How are you today?
Wonderful. What's up?
I'm doing good. Hey, with what Al Gore just said, he's so wrong. The reason the country's in the problems it is right now is because of liberals. Because they're blocking the president. They will not let him work on his agenda. They will not let him do what he promised he was going to do when he was elected by the people. And for Al Gore to sit there with that stupid monotone voice of his and say this, it's everything's Trump's fault. Well, it's not. It comes right back to you liberals, right back to the Democrats. What they really need to do is look at themselves and say, let's let Trump really screw things up. Let's just let him do what he wants to do. And then guess what? It'll come out just fine. But these people will not do it. As far as the climate change, really, we're still talking about that crap they got proven wrong back in the 70s when it was global cooling. Nothing's gone good for these people. But anyway, Bill, I appreciate you letting me on.
Sure. I love the calls. I love the calls. Steve Millington, I was thinking about this. The other day there was a piece from this Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge where he reviewed the latest from a lot of these academics is that the climate change stuff has been fudged anyway. And, it was hot here last week, but it's summertime in the high desert.
Yeah,
and then it cooled off.
That's what we expect, is to have some warmer weather. Somebody was, I was commenting with an acquaintance just this last week, and they were kind of, oh, it's so hot, so hot. And I said, wait a minute. 6 months ago, we were all breaking a sweat trying to shovel snow. Oh, that's right. I said, take it and enjoy it. And 6 months from now, we'll be shoveling snow.
Last week, they had a high temperature in Phoenix, Arizona, and I had a liberal friend say, well, you see, there you go. And I said, well, wait a minute. It was 1 degree higher than the previous record, which was set, I believe, in 1914. So what was going on in 1914 that made it so dadgum hot?
Yeah, and in 100 years, oh my goodness, we have got global warming.
But it has been hot before, and it was hot way, way back in the days before people were even driving automobiles.
No cars. We can't blame it on cars. And not that many people. Good gracious. I mean, 100 years ago, we just didn't have quite that many people, in Phoenix especially. So what has happened that in 100 years it went up 1 degree?
Yeah, maybe 1 degree, because we were also measuring at the time by putting a finger into our mouths and sticking it up into the air, and it seems kind of warm.
And Bill, you mentioned that's an interesting observation. We have much more sophisticated measuring equipment, scientific measuring equipment, than we had 100 years ago. And so, we're only off by 1%, 114 or something versus 113 in 100 years. The measuring devices could have that much, they could be off more than that, for heaven's sakes, just in the measuring device.
We've got more coming up with Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. To offend some of his grandchildren today, he wore his Boise State hat. It's the Cougars in the family won't like it. It's 67. I just was noticing, I told Steve Millington, Sebastian Gorka's on the television right now, and that means somebody's getting a hard time.
Oh, boy,
and it's not Sebastian. We have call it 8:34, and it's 66. Bill Colley with you as well. And I do want to mention our friends at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert, Dr. Christine Pickup. Why would you choose Dr. Pickup's office for hearing health? Well, service. Did you know that Dr. Pickup offers communication skills classes and oral rehabilitation therapy, and you can use this at home? At Mount Harrison Audiology, she knows that hearing aids are only part of the equation. True hearing health care should include tools and techniques that enhance communication for you and your loved ones. Trust your hearing health to Dr. Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology, 208-312-0957. Steve Millington is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He's here until 9 o'clock this morning. And, Steve, we have a telephone caller.
Already?
Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Hey, Bill, great show as always. You know, you had the previous caller said the problem with this country was these liberals. And, you know, I'm a registered Republican, and I have to disagree. I think the problem with this country is the Democrat and the Republican Party. For 8 years, we were promised that they would repeal Obamacare. And they've had 8 years to work on a plan, and they haven't. You know, when it gets down to it, they don't care about this country. They care about the power that political office affords them, and the hell with the people and what it's going to do to their future. You know, we're going to end up like Greece. We're going to end up a third world country because our politicians lack the guts, this backbone to take and make those hard decisions. And the ones that are going to suffer are us, the American people. I find it disgusting. And, you know, what can you do? I'm thinking, you know, the problem is we vote Republicans and we say, well, they're the lesser of two evils. Evil is still evil, no matter which way you slice it. What we need is people that have the guts and that will stand up and say, we're not going to take this. We're going to do what's right. And you know what? You can't give everything to everyone. It's just impossible. But we should create an environment where people can thrive and be successful and this country can flourish. And thank you again for this topic. It's important, and I hope everyone gets behind it and puts pressure on these Republican committee. You know, on the local level, it's one thing, but on a federal level, we're no different. Thank you.
I was listening to that, and 6 months ago we were told everyone was unhappy with Obamacare because of the skyrocketing premiums. Now the media says, oh, everybody actually loves Obama. No, they love something they think they're getting for nothing that somebody else is paying for. But Steve Millington, when he brings this up about the Republican Party, I mean, clearly there were a lot of promises made, and people are going to be hot about this, especially at the grassroots level.
Well, and you know, my own personal experience, why in the world is this so tough? I'm kind of in the camp with Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. Just repeal Obamacare, and then let's build a brand new bridge. We don't have to try to fix that mess. Just let it fall apart. Let's start over with something that's more manageable and more. Mike Lee had an interesting op-ed piece in Resurgent this morning that said why I'm voting no. And basically, he has a beautiful example here from a professor, William Graham Sumner, that said the forgotten. He wrote a book entitled "The Forgotten Man," and in this situation, the forgotten man is all of us who are paying excessive health insurance premiums to cover the costs of people that won't pay anything at all. And it's Resurgent online. Fantastic article about what the heck is wrong with this health insurance thing and the simple things that it would take to fix it.
We have another caller looking to join us. Caller, we've got about 90 seconds before the break. You're up next. Go ahead. You're on KLIX.
Yeah, you know, I agree that we need to just repeal it, and I think we need to go back to just a free market with open borders. But My problem is these guys are spineless, and we're going to vote them out, and we're going to end up paying them for life no matter what. I think that's got to be changed. You know, Congress and the Senate and everything else is the only place in the world that I know of that you can get fired from a job and still get paid and get benefits for life.
If I'd have just been a little bit smarter a few years ago, maybe I could have been elected to one of those positions and have a paid retirement for life. That would just be so. And it isn't just retirement. He did mention the benefits, and you look at the like health. And we're just talking about health insurance. I'm here to tell you, if all the members of the Congress and their staffs were required.
And the Republicans were looking to exempt themselves from any new bill.
That's exactly right. If they were required to have the same health care options that we have, this thing would be fixed this afternoon at 3:00.
I asked a senator one time, he was a Democrat, about Obamacare when it was going through the process about it. And he said to me, well, I said, would you take the same health care? And he gave me an answer to another question. So I asked him a second time. When I got to it the third time and kept pressing, he finally just smiled and said, no.
Yeah.
So that tells you in other words, I'm better than you, and this is how we're going to live.
That's right.
More with Steve Millington on the way. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:40 and it's 67. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. Our studio guest until 9 o'clock this morning, Steve Millington, is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Speaking of guests, I just wanted to mention tomorrow's lineup. At 8:15, we're expected to be joined by Representative Raul Labrador. Actually, it's a lighter topic tomorrow. It's the new Harmon Killebrew Post Office in Payette, which he was responsible for having the baseball player's name attached. And so I wrote his office and said, well, when do we get a Jerry Kramer post office? So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Also at 8:30, Dr. Jonathan Tripp, or one of the doctor's associates, will join us from Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls. Tripp Family Medicine still looking for new patients. And often, if you're a patient of Dr. Tripp or one of the associates in the office, they can see you on the very same day if you call in the morning and you've got an illness. And we wanted to point out as well, the office is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. Remember, life's too short not to feel good. But the fun doesn't end there tomorrow, because from 9 until 9:30, Steve Berman, who writes for The Resurgent, the website we were just quoting, is going to join us on the air. Steve Berman is the number 2 writer behind Eric Erickson at that publication. And then at 9:30, Steve Yates, former chairman of the Idaho Republican Party and now a candidate for lieutenant governor, is scheduled to join us. So it's going to be a busy few days.
And by the way, while we're talking about Steve Yates, following his appearance here on the radio at 10 o'clock, we're going to have a meet and greet with Steve Yates at the Planning and Zoning Conference Room in the County West facility. So you can listen to him on the radio, then come over to the P&Z conference room and sit around and visit and ask questions and talk to Steve Yates. He's kicking off his campaign formally kicking off his campaign today. He starts in Boise this morning, then he's flying to Coeur d'Alene, and he'll be in Idaho Falls this afternoon late, and then he's driving from Idaho Falls to Coeur d'Alene, and he's going to come through Twin to make that pass. So we'll have him here tomorrow, both on your radio show and the meet and greet at the P&Z.
We had an interesting discussion last segment, because a caller pointed out he doesn't see a lot of difference any longer between Democrats and Republicans. There was a fellow from West Virginia named Joe Manchin.
Yes.
Who is Democrat, but he's pro-life, very conservative. He's just mixed up. He's in the wrong party. He belongs in ours. Joe Manchin made an appearance on TV last night. I believe he was, I think it was on Neil Cavuto's program, and they were talking about health care. And Manchin, he's a bit of a fresh air coming in out of politics. Take a listen for a moment.
Well, in West Virginia, every demographic gets hit, very hard. And what we're saying is, let's sit down and work through. We know that the private exchange is serious problems, and private markets are hurting. We can help there. Also, we have people that we've given 20 million people the wealth of health care and no instructions how to use it in the most effective and efficient manner. So we know there's great savings there, but before you throw people off for the sake of saving, you ought to at least give them a chance to earn it and show them how to live a better quality of life. That's what we're trying to do, Neil.
This plan, Senator, keeps intact for the time being these the taxes that are prominent in Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, as we know them, on investment income and on Medicare for the well-to-do. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, the taxes, I think, once you start removing any of the money before you start fixing the product in the market, if you will, you've got serious problems, because then you're behind the 8 ball trying to catch up, and you're going to be hurting people and putting undue harm to them. And just, we don't need to do that.
As a Democrat, he admitted in the first 30 seconds there that the current Obamacare simply isn't working when it comes to cost control and containment, and things are only going to get worse.
And in one of the articles that I was reading this morning while I was trying to get a few things in line to come in this morning, I think Trump had a meeting with a dinner meeting yesterday with a bunch of senators, and one of the comments that's been released to the media was, let's just let Obamacare fail. Just let it collapse and fail. And that's not that far down the road. There are several states where that one insurance company after another, and I think one of the prominent ones is Ohio. They now have only one insurance carrier. Well, they will have one insurance carrier providing insurance coverage beginning in 2018, 6 months from now. Just let the cockeyed thing collapse. When that happens, people are going to say, okay, we've had enough of this stupid deal. Let's find something that works. And the work part is let's just repeal Obama, just repeal the whole thing. And they were Mitch McConnell said, gee, we just need to have a 2-year window on this. We'll repeal it, and then we'll take 2 years to fix it. No. We will repeal it, and it drops dead December 31st of 2017. Boys, you got 6 months to get it fixed. Now cancel all your goofy vacations, stay in town, get to work done.
I would not buy a used car from Mitch McConnell.
Oh, boy.
We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on Top Story at 8:48. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned, but what in the devil is the government doing in our health care to begin with? Let the market work. Remove all this garbage, except for maybe some minor regulatory legislation that keeps bad people from doing bad things, but get them out, period. They're the ones that are destroying the market. They're not helping it. They're hindering it at every single turn. I just don't understand the mentality of, well, we can fix it. No, just get the hell out of the way and let us do it.
I think that's a great, either
lead,
follow, or get out of the way. and these people back in Washington won't do either. None of the above.
They're so afraid that some newspaper editor somewhere will say something nasty about them. We have another caller. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Steve Millington, our chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party on KLIX.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. I've worked for the government. Well, I shouldn't say worked. I've been employed by the government for 27 years. And I can tell you, there's nothing the government runs that gets better or run efficient. And I can tell you, I've lived it, and I'm not proud of it, but I've seen it. And they just say we need more money, we need more people. And it just goes on and on. We get bigger. They feed on themselves. Half of what they do is just to their existence. Thanks, guys. See you.
Thank you.
Joe Manchin, I mentioned him earlier. When I was a young reporter, I went to a county legislative meeting. I used to go every week to these meetings, and I'd go to the committee meetings. I was a beat reporter for a while, and we had one Democrat, and he was like Manchin. He was actually a conservative, and one day he was doing a floor speech, and he just suddenly stopped, and he said, it's like dealing with your local school districts. They can never have enough money. And he was pointing out the fact that if you start giving these organizations, other people money and listening, they're just going to keep coming back and say, more.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with some folks about K-12 education in the state of Idaho. And one of the responses, it seemed to be the most, the first one that they offered as an answer, and the one that they wanted to hang on to the hardest, the longest, and that is, what about our education system in Idaho? What do you see K-12 education? How are we doing? The answer first was, well, we added $300 million here and $300 million here, and we added another $300 million last year, and that's going to get our education system back in good shape. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying to myself, one of my acquaintances from my very early years was a guy named Albert Einstein. Now, that's a joke. He was gone before I got here, okay? But it is attributed to him the statement that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different outcome. And so we look, and our caller's correct. Give government more money and they'll want more money. So what do we want to do? What's wrong with our education system? Well, we've added this much and this much and this much. And I don't doubt for one moment that as a result of the '08 recession and the difficulty we had here in Idaho, and it was severe, that we need to put this money back in there to get. But you see, the answer to all the problems is we're giving it lots of money. Nobody looks at the structural situation or the ultimate outcome. They just say, we're putting lots of money in there. It's going to be okay.
We have another caller. We'll squeeze one more caller in here, and then Steve wants to, before we get to the end of the program, make a mention of a big meeting coming up with statewide Republicans. Caller, you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Good morning.
Whether or not it was Marx or Lenin, the keystone to communism is socialized medicine. I'll hang up.
And that's an interesting point. One of the points that I think it was Marx wrote it in his Communist Manifesto, and Lenin was a few years after Marx, but they have pushed that, the socialized medicine thing came on the scene in America in the 1930s, and as a result of the Great Depression and economic controls, wages were kept artificially low. There was hardly any increase in wages during the 1930s. They were kind of fixed while they thought they would get this thing back. And government interference caused the recession, the Great Depression, to last 10 years instead of 10 months. But one of the ways that Roosevelt, FDR, used, one of the tools that he used to improve people's take-home pay, wrong term, but you'll understand, he pushed that employers, the bosses, the guys employing the people, would provide free health care. And so that's where we started there was some isolated pockets of it happening, but it became a national push during FDR's terms, and that's where the health care being paid for by someone else really took off.
And Mike Lee, by the way, has the advantage in being an opponent of all of this, in that he comes from a state where the safety net is really still the old-fashioned way from the church.
And people take care of each other.
Right. And so the other 49 states might be able to learn a lesson from that as well. Oh, Chuck Schumer's on TV. I'm glad we're not listening.
You're giving me a complex here this morning, Bill. I think you're talking to me, but you're watching that cut and pick of television.
Well, it's Chuck Schumer's like watching a train wreck. You can't avoid it. We want to mention quickly before the end of the show, statewide, it's off year for elections, but the statewide Republican meeting is on the way.
Within the state Republican Party organization, we have a series of meetings. Twice a year, we get together and have what we call the State Central Committee meeting. And one of those meetings always is the weekend prior to the beginning of the legislative session. So it happens the first week or first 10 days of January, and we hold that meeting in Boise because all the legislators are coming to town, and it's a great opportunity for the Central Committee members to visit with all of the legislative people, because their process, this is held on a Friday, Saturday, and the legislature begins on Monday. So that happens on every January. Then at the 6 month interval during the summer months, we have what's known as our quote summer meeting. And this year, the summer meeting will be held in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So the state central committee meeting will be held in Coeur d'Alene on Friday and Saturday of this week. Um, Now, when we say the state central committee, that's four members of the state central committee from each county, plus one person, the legislative district chairman from each of the 35 legislative districts. So it's not a huge number of people. We'll have a maximum of about 210 voting personnel. There'll be many others there, obviously, but a maximum of 210 voting people.
Well, when you say Coeur d'Alene, you can then ensure that you're going to get a large turnout.
You would sure think so, except there's a couple of things that is becoming obvious to a lot of people. Summer months, weekend, Coeur d'Alene, motel rates are higher than a kite.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are checking around and they're saying, whoa, I have to pay that kind of money even on Trivago or whatever the thing is called. I can't even pronounce it right. You're still looking at a large nightly rate for motels.
And if you're coming from Swan Valley, it's a long drive.
Oh boy, yeah. I talked with a guy yesterday who lives in Soda Springs, and I said, holy cow, it's a big, hard 1 day's drive from there up to Coeur d'Alene.
You got to go up and hit 15 and hit 90, I would imagine, in Montana, and then head west.
I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna go over to Boise and take the back road up through Grangeville and the Whitebird Pass and Moscow and Lewiston, and then up to Coeur d'Alene. Then coming home, I'm going to take 90 over to Missoula, Montana, and then cut down through Salmon and Chalice and Stanley and come home that way.
Ooh,
so make a
scenic
little
tour.
Yeah, take a tour.
Yeah.
So what happens when we have these meetings? Well, on Friday we have a whole series of meetings take place. The executive committee for the state central committee will have their formal meeting. They meet on a monthly basis. This one is a little more formal in its presentation. Then we have two standing committees that always meet. One's called the Resolutions Committee. One's called the Rules Committee. A resolution, herefore be it resolved, we want the Idaho to do these things. We want the legislature to do this, blah, blah, blah. The Rules Committee is, we don't like this rule. It says we can only stand up at a certain time, change it. Well, I'm chairman of the Rules Committee, and I'm going to have a tough weekend in Coeur d'Alene.
Don't cross this line. We'll see Steve Millington next week. News is next from Fox.